November 18, 2024, East Kilbride, Scotland. At 12:10 p.m., two patrol officers walk up to the door of an apartment in the Glen Lee neighborhood. The call came from Alison Spencer. Her daughter, 21-year-old Phoenix Spencer Horn, had never missed a shift at the local hotel before, and now she hadn't shown up for work and had stopped answering her phone. For the Spencer family, a day and a half of silence was deeply out of character. The door is opened by Euan Methin. He appears calm, steady. No frantic movements, no visible panic. When asked about Phoenix's whereabouts, Methin silently steps aside and invites the officers in. The moment they cross the threshold, they register a heavy, metallic scent in the warm air. The unmistakable odor of a significant amount of blood. There are no obvious signs of a struggle, but in the center of the room on the floor lies a human figure covered with a kitchen towel. When one of the officers lifts the edge of the fabric, the welfare check immediately escalates into a confirmed crime scene. Beneath the towel is Phoenix's unclothed body. The extent of the injuries forces the patrol officers to immediately request detectives and forensic technicians. The scene shifts from routine response to full criminal investigation within seconds. Euan Methin remains in the same room. He does not attempt to flee. He asks no questions. Standing just a few feet away, he watches the officers work. An ordinary Monday afternoon in East Kilbride comes to a halt. The forensic process begins. Just minutes before, officers knocked on the apartment door. In Glen Lee, an emergency operator received an incoming call through the rescue service line. The recording captures a male voice, steady, even, without heavy breathing or panic. The caller identifies himself as Euan Methin. He gets straight to the point, calmly informing the dispatcher, "I killed my girlfriend." When the operator asks about her condition, Methin responds in the same flat tone. He confirms she is deceased, and adds details that would later become critical to investigators. "I know she's dead, mate. She's dead. I even tried to cut her." There is no audible remorse, no attempt to frame the moment as loss of control. Methin speaks as though he is reporting the completion of a routine task. The dispatcher keeps him on the line, documenting the address. As emergency units are dispatched to the scene, Methin remains inside the apartment with Phoenix's body. He does not hang up. He does not shout. He does not attempt to justify his actions. Investigators would later note that this call became the first documented evidence of the suspect's profound emotional detachment. Authorities now had more than a confession. They had an audio record capturing the behavior of a man who had just committed a crime and was methodically waiting for law enforcement to arrive. That call effectively removes any future opportunity for the defense to argue loss of control or emotional shock. Every word Methin spoke, preserved in the recorded line, reflects full awareness of reality. He doesn't ask for help for Phoenix. He simply states the outcome of his actions. When officers later step inside the apartment, they see a man whose calm demeanor perfectly mirrors the voice captured on that recording. After patrol officers secured the perimeter, forensic specialists entered the residence. The evidence collection phase began. In the living area where Phoenix Spencer Horn was found, investigators documented no signs of forced entry. The locks on the front door and the windows were intact. That detail suggested the aggressor was already inside the apartment or had unrestricted access to it. On the floor, forensic technicians carefully recorded the position of Phoenix's body. She was unclothed. A clean kitchen towel had been placed over her. During the detailed examination, specialists determined that the 21-year-old's head had been separated from her torso. It had been positioned upright and secured beneath her left forearm. Investigators classified the placement as deliberate and methodical, an action carried out after death. In the kitchen sink and along the countertops, 3 knives were recovered. Forensic testing confirmed the presence of biological material on each of them. An autopsy would later reveal that Phoenix sustained more than 20 sharp force injuries. Most were concentrated around her face and neck, areas which in criminal investigations can sometimes suggest an attempt by the offender to degrade or depersonalize the victim. The cause of immediate death, however, was a single deep wound to the chest, damaging vital organs. Forensic teams also took note of the order throughout the rest of the apartment. Despite the scale of the aggression, there were no overturned tables, no scattered belongings, no signs of a prolonged struggle. Every detail from the placement of the knives to the way the body had been moved pointed to a sequence of deliberate actions. Each piece of evidence helped reconstruct a scene that investigators would later describe not as a spontaneous incident, but as a conscious and calculated act carried out against someone who had no real opportunity to defend herself. On the day Phoenix's body was discovered, Euan Methin was formally taken into custody. He was 25 years old at the time of the crime. In East Kilbride, he had lived what neighbors and co-workers described as a low-profile life. Methin worked for the Postal Service, kept a regular schedule, and had never previously come to the attention of authorities for violent offenses. Those who knew him remembered a quiet, reserved man, someone who preferred to stay in the background. But inside the police station, his demeanor shifted in a way that investigators would later describe as deeply unsettling. During his initial interview, Methin continued to display striking mental clarity. Detectives documented his direct response to the charges presented to him. There was no denial, no attempt to construct an alibi. Instead, he coolly assessed his situation. Looking at one of the officers, he said, "I suppose this is what the next 25 years of my life will look like." The statement was delivered in an even tone, without visible remorse for Phoenix. Investigators noted that he appeared to view a prison sentence not as punishment for taking a life, but as the logical outcome of an action that had simply reached its conclusion. During the search and initial evidence review, authorities confirmed that Methin had made no effort to destroy key evidence or flee the apartment in the hours following the crime. He remained inside, moving through the space on his own terms, as though still in control of his surroundings. As investigators began building a psychological profile, a picture emerged of an individual with a profound deficit in empathy. Methin answered questions freely about how he moved the body and what tools he used. He described his actions as a series of practical decisions, almost procedural in nature. His background as a postal worker offered no warning signs of such calculated aggression, making the contrast between his past life and his present behavior all the more stark. 2. Understand how Phoenix Spencer Horn ended up in that apartment on November 18th, we have to go back 21 years. Phoenix was born in 2003 in the small town of Strathaven, just outside Glasgow. She was the youngest daughter of Alison and Graham Spencer, growing up alongside her siblings in a home built on support, honesty, and accountability. Her parents worked hard to instill responsibility and respect in their sons and daughters. Family members described Phoenix as someone who carried a natural sense of optimism. In school, teachers noticed how easily she connected with classmates and how often she stepped in to help others. She wasn't drawn to confrontation. If there was tension, she chose calm conversation over conflict. After graduating, Phoenix began working in her hometown. She held positions at the Strathaven Hotel and at a local cafe. Co-workers remembered her as dependable, always on time, attentive to guests, and able to make people feel welcome within moments of meeting her. In the service industry, that kind of presence matters, and Phoenix had it. By the age of 20, she had grown into an independent young woman making plans for her future. She maintained a wide circle of friends and a close bond with her family. She spoke with her mother regularly, sharing details of her day-to-day life. Working in hospitality genuinely suited her personality. She enjoyed being around people. Those who knew Phoenix personally often emphasized one defining trait: loyalty. She was the kind of daughter and friend who would show up when it mattered most. There were no dark secrets in her life. No history of aggression, no warning signs. She embodied the image of a socially active young woman from a stable, supportive environment. And, according to her friends, it was that openness, that belief in the good in others that would later place her in harm's way. When Euan Methin entered her life, Phoenix saw someone quiet, perhaps even reserved. Possibly someone who needed understanding. She had no way of knowing that behind that calm exterior was a personality capable of completely destroying another human being. The relationship that would ultimately end inside the apartment in Glen Lee began several years earlier. Euan Methin and Phoenix Spencer Horn first met at a family gathering. At the time, Phoenix was 20 years old, socially active, balancing her work at the Strathaven Hotel with her studies. Methin was 25. From the very beginning, those around them noticed the contrast in their Temperaments. Phoenix was outgoing. Often at the center of conversation. Methin, on the other hand, lingered at the edges of the room, quiet, observant. Speaking little, revealing even less. Despite their differences in temperament, communication between them began to grow. Later, Phoenix's friends would admit that her choice seemed unusual. But she had always believed in giving people a chance, in seeing the best in them, even when others hesitated. During the first months of the relationship, Euan Methin showed a level of openness that didn't match his typically reserved nature. He tried new hobbies, took an active interest in the details of Phoenix's daily life, and managed to make a positive impression on her family. Allison and Graham saw a young man who appeared genuinely devoted to their youngest daughter. A few months after meeting, the couple decided to move in together. They rented a small apartment in East Kilbride. Their daily routine looked ordinary from the outside. Weekend visits to family, birthday celebrations, steady jobs. Methin continued working for the postal service while Phoenix remained in the hospitality industry. To friends and relatives, the relationship seemed stable and free of serious conflict. Photos from that time show a young couple building what looked like the foundation of adult life. But it was during the same period that a quiet shift began. One where outward calm slowly started masking changes inside the home. By early 2024, the dynamic between them began to change. It wasn't sudden. It unfolded gradually but consistently. The attention Methin once showed began to evolve into control. The first signs appeared in the form of criticism directed at Phoenix's appearance. He voiced disapproval of her clothing, urging her to dress more conservatively. Soon, his focus shifted to her workplace. He openly expressed frustration about her interactions with co-workers and hotel guests. Over time, that control intensified into systematic jealousy. Methin monitored Phoenix's phone calls and messages. He limited her time with friends. If she came home later than expected, the atmosphere in the apartment would grow tense. Arguments often ended not with resolution, but with extended periods of cold silence, a tactic Methin appeared to use as emotional leverage. Phoenix, who had always believed in resolving conflict through conversation, tried for months to smooth things over. She hoped the relationship would return to what it had once been. She convinced herself that her partner's behavior reflected temporary struggles, something they could work through together. She believed patience and understanding would be enough. By mid-2024, the situation had reached a breaking point. Phoenix began quietly confiding in close friends that she no longer felt safe or comfortable in her own home. She said she needed space, time to think, time to breathe. In reality, she was preparing to end the relationship. But Methin did not accept that decision. His response wasn't open confrontation. It was a shift in strategy. He began presenting himself as someone battling deep internal struggles, someone who needed compassion, not separation. That shift caused Phoenix to postpone her final decision to leave. In an effort to keep Phoenix Spencer Horn close, Euan Methin turned to self-blame. As a tool, he admitted to having serious issues with prohibited substances and prescription medications. In conversations with Phoenix and those around her, he claimed that his outbursts of anger and erratic behavior were the direct result of cocaine use, alcohol abuse, and uncontrolled steroid intake. He crafted the image of a man who had lost control because of dependency, but who sincerely wanted to change for the sake of their future. Together, Methin promised Phoenix that once he completed detox and stopped using, their lives would return to normal. 4. Phoenix, those admissions carried weight. Her natural empathy and her instinct to help worked against her. Instead of cutting ties with someone showing escalating aggression, she stepped into the role of caretaker, supporting him in what she believed was a genuine effort to recover. However, investigators would later determine that Methin took no meaningful steps toward treatment. Instead, he used his substance use as a convenient explanation, a shield that allowed him to continue exerting control over her life. By the fall of 2024, the atmosphere inside the East Kilbride apartment appeared calm on the surface, but that stability was only cosmetic. Methin continued living a guarded, secretive lifestyle, using substances out of Phoenix's sight or citing them as justification for his emotional withdrawal. Phoenix kept working, maintaining professionalism and her trademark optimism even as tension inside the apartment steadily grew. Her final messages and calls from that period contained no direct statements suggesting imminent danger, but they reflected exhaustion, fatigue from constant manipulation and emotional pressure. By November and now ND24, the dynamic had become dangerously unbalanced. Phoenix remained tied to the offender by a sense of responsibility and compassion, while Methin had already begun to see her not as a partner, but as something he needed to control. The events that unfolded in the early hours of November 17, 2024, immediately after the crime, reveal more about Euan Methin's state of mind than any courtroom testimony ever could. While Phoenix Spencer Horn's body remained inside the apartment, Methin displayed what investigators later described as complete emotional detachment from the reality of what had happened. Digital forensic analysis uncovered highly unusual activity on the mobile devices inside the residence. For approximately 11 hours, from 8 o'clock a.m. until 7 o'clock p.m. that Sunday, Methin repeatedly used Phoenix's phone to access online adult content. During that span, investigators documented 170 separate viewing sessions. All of it occurred inside the same apartment where Phoenix's remains were still present. Behavioral specialists reviewing the timeline noted the absence of panic, shock, or attempts at self-harm. Reactions sometimes observed in similar cases. Instead, Methin appeared to immerse himself in compulsive digital consumption, seemingly disconnecting from the physical reality around him. He made no effort to contact emergency services throughout that entire Sunday. No call for medical assistance, no Outreach to authorities. He chose instead to remain online. At the same time, Methin took steps to secure another supply of prohibited substances. Investigators confirmed that he arranged for a delivery directly to the apartment, the very location where Phoenix's body was still lying. The substances were delivered and consumed that same day. Taken together, the online activity and the substance use, prosecutors formed a clear impression of a man operating with chilling indifference. While Phoenix's family was trying desperately to reach her, Methin methodically filled his hours with stimulants and digital distraction, building a wall of artificial stimulation around himself in the aftermath of extreme aggression. On Sunday morning, November 17, with Phoenix already gone, Methin began constructing a false digital trail. At 9:37 a.m., he used her phone to send a message to Allison Spencer. The text read, "Sorry, just woke up." Short, casual, designed to reassure. While Phoenix's body remained inside the apartment, Methin staged normally. Surveillance cameras later captured him driving out of the parking area in Phoenix's vehicle. Investigators determined that the purpose of that trip was to obtain additional prohibited substances and to dispose of certain blood-stained items connected to the crime. After returning to the apartment, Methin locked himself inside once again. Throughout the day, he not only consumed media content, but also physically moved Phoenix's remains. Later, forensic analysis of the flooring revealed distinct drag marks consistent with repositioning a body. Meanwhile, Phoenix's family continued trying to reach her. By Monday, November 18, the situation had escalated. The hotel where Phoenix worked reported her absence from her scheduled shift. Something entirely out of character given her reliability and work ethic. After receiving a call from her co-workers, Allison Spencer insisted on an immediate welfare check at the apartment. Realizing that a police visit was inevitable, Methin sent one final message stating that Phoenix was still asleep. When that explanation could no longer delay intervention, he made the call that began this investigation, dialing the rescue service number 999. Until patrol officers arrived at 12:10 p.m. Methin remained inside the apartment. By that point, he had stopped attempting to conceal what had happened. To reconstruct the events of Saturday night, investigators traced the timeline back to the last confirmed contact from Phoenix Spencer Horn. On November 16 at 9:37 p.m., she messaged her mother to confirm she was home. The evening appeared calm. The couple had dinner and watched a movie. Nothing outwardly suggested what was about to unfold. Shortly after midnight, in the early hours of Sunday, the atmosphere inside the apartment changed dramatically. Neighbors later told investigators they heard heavy movement and repeated impact sounds strong enough to cause vibrations through shared walls and furniture. Based on findings from forensic pathologists, authorities concluded that the attack was sudden. Methin began by physically overpowering Phoenix, preventing her from calling out. The subsequent series of sharp force injuries was concentrated around her face. Experts determined that the fatal wound to the chest was inflicted when she was already in a defenseless state. Death occurred instantly. Immediately afterward, Methin moved her body into the bathroom. To carry out the separation of the head, he used tools taken from the kitchen. The absence of defensive injuries beneath Phoenix's fingernails supported the conclusion that she did not have the opportunity to mount active resistance. The entire process of post-mortem manipulation lasted several hours, concluding around dawn. By the time the sun rose over the city, Methin had completed what investigators described as the technical phase of the crime and shifted his attention to using Phoenix's mobile phone. The trial began on June 17, 2025 at the High Court in Glasgow. Prosecutors relied heavily on digital forensic data and street surveillance footage. Particular emphasis was placed on Methin's behavior in the hours following the crime. Evidence of his online activity conducted while Phoenix's remains were still present in the apartment became central to the prosecution's argument that his actions were deliberate, calculated, and carried out with chilling emotional detachment. The defense built its case around the argument of chemical influence on the defendant's mental state. Attorneys claimed that a combination of alcohol and various substances had led to a loss of control. However, the results of a psychiatric evaluation along with the clearly documented sequence of Methin's actions from sending staged text messages to driving a vehicle and arranging deliveries told a different story. Investigators concluded that he was fully aware of what he was doing. In the end, Methin entered a guilty plea on all charges, including the crime itself, and attempting to obstruct the investigation. On July 14, 2025, the sentence was handed down. The judge described Methin's actions as an extreme degradation of human character. Euan Methin was sentenced to life in prison. Under the court's ruling, he will not be eligible for parole for at least 23 years. In their final statement, Phoenix Spencer Horne's family said that the cruelty of her final hours permanently altered their sense of safety in the world around them. Phoenix's story remains in the records of East Kilbride, a stark reminder of what can be hidden behind the doors of apartments that appear ordinary from the outside.